Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Derek Thornton stood in his mahogany-paneled study, watching the rain streak down the floor-to-ceiling windows of his estate. At 42, he had built an empire from nothing, a chain of luxury hotels that stretched across the East Coast. His calloused hands, now manicured but still bearing the scars of his construction worker days, gripped a crystal tumbler of aged bourbon. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd grown up in a trailer park in rural Tennessee, where his alcoholic father had beaten him senseless every night until Derek grew big enough to fight back. At 16, he put his father in the hospital and never looked back. No family, no safety net, just raw determination and a promise to himself that he'd never be vulnerable again. That promise had served him well until he met Ashley Greenwood at a charity gala 7 years ago. She was everything he wasn't: old money, sophisticated, effortlessly elegant. Her family had owned textile mills for generations before selling to focus on philanthropy. Where Derek was sharp edges and controlled fury, Ashley was silken grace. "You're like a beautiful predator," she'd whispered to him on their third date, tracing the scar above his left eyebrow. All that danger wrapped in an expensive suit. He should have listened to the warning in her voice. Their marriage had been a merger of his new money and her established pedigree. Derek provided the financial empire. Ashley provided the social connections and respectability his business needed to break into the upper echelons of society. For 5 years, it worked perfectly. She played the devoted wife at board meetings and charity functions, while he built their wealth and power. Tyler, their son, had been the unexpected gift that made Derek believe in something beyond profit margins. The boy had Derek's sharp intelligence, but Ashley's natural charisma. At 13, Tyler could discuss business strategy with Derek's executives and charm Ashley's society friends with equal ease. But Derek had made a critical error. He'd allowed himself to love them both completely. The first crack appeared 6 months ago when Derek noticed Ashley's schedule changing. Gallery openings that ran too late, spa weekends that seemed to multiply, phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room. His investigative instincts, honed from years of vetting business partners, began to surface. Derek had learned long ago that information was power, and power was survival. Within 2 weeks, he had a comprehensive dossier on his wife's activities. The photographs were professionally shot, clinically detailed, and absolutely devastating. Ashley and Brad Sinclair, Derek's business partner and supposed best friend, locked in passionate embraces at the downtown penthouse Derek had bought for executive meetings. The same penthouse where Derek had celebrated landing their biggest hotel contract just 3 months prior. Brad Sinclair, the golden boy from California who'd joined Derek's company 5 years ago with venture capital backing and an MBA from Stanford. Derek had seen potential in the younger man's aggressive sales tactics and had gradually given him more responsibility. Brad had access to Derek's business accounts, his personal schedule, his family's private moments. The betrayal was surgical in its precision. Derek spent the next month in methodical preparation. He hired additional private investigators, forensic accountants, and security specialists. What he discovered made his blood run cold with a fury he hadn't felt since putting his father down. Brad wasn't just sleeping with Ashley. He was systematically positioning himself to take over Derek's company. The younger man had been courting Derek's investors, suggesting that Derek was becoming unstable and needed to step back. Brad had convinced Ashley to sign documents that would give her significant control over Derek's assets in the event of a divorce. They weren't just having an affair. They were orchestrating a coup. The final piece fell into place when Derek reviewed the timeline. Ashley had been feeding Brad information about Derek's business deals, his strategies, even his private conversations. The hostile takeover attempt that Derek's company had successfully defended against last year, Brad had been feeding intelligence to the attackers while publicly standing beside Derek. Derek poured another bourbon and opened the hidden safe behind his desk. Inside were the original documents he'd prepared, divorce papers, custody arrangements, and a complete reorganization of his business empire. Everything was designed to be swift and final. But as he reviewed the papers, a different plan began to form. Derek Thornton didn't just want to win. He wanted to destroy everyone who had betrayed him so completely that they would never recover. And he wanted them to know, with absolute clarity, that their destruction was his design. He locked the documents back in the safe and reached for his phone. "Mitchell," he said when his lawyer answered, "I need you to draft some new papers, and I want you to arrange a meeting with Ashley and Brad tomorrow. Tell them I want to discuss expanding Brad's role in the company." As Derek hung up, a smile played across his lips for the first time in months. They wanted to play games with a man who had fought his way out of hell. They were about to learn why Derek Thornton never forgot a betrayal and never forgave one. Chapter 2. The Setup. The conference room at Thornton Hotel's headquarters felt different to Derek as he watched Ashley and Brad enter together. They maintained careful distance, their interactions professionally cordial. But Derek could see the subtle signs now. The way Ashley's fingers briefly touched Brad's wrist when she passed him the coffee, the synchronized timing of their arrival. "Derek, you look tired," Ashley said, settling into her chair with practiced grace. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Have you been sleeping?" "Fine," Derek replied, studying her face. After 15 years together, he could read her micro-expressions like a balance sheet. The slight tightness around her eyes, the way she pressed her lips together when she thought he wasn't looking, she was nervous. Brad Sinclair lounged in his chair with characteristic confidence, his blonde hair perfectly styled, his smile as sharp as his Italian suit. "So what's this about expanding my role?" "I have to say, I'm excited about the possibilities." Derek placed a folder on the polished table. "I've been thinking about succession planning. The company's at a point where I need to consider the next generation of leadership." He watched Brad's pupils dilate slightly, a tell Derek had learned to spot in countless negotiations. The younger man was practically salivating. "I want to propose something unconventional," Derek continued. "Brad, you've proven yourself invaluable to this company. Your strategic thinking, your relationship-building skills." Derek paused, letting the word relationship hang in the air for just a moment longer than necessary. "I think you're ready for more responsibility." Ashley leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I want to make Brad a full partner. 50-50 ownership of Thornton Hotels." The silence in the room was deafening. Derek could practically hear their hearts racing. Brad's mask slipped for just an instant, revealing naked ambition before he recovered. "Derek, that's incredibly generous. But are you sure? This company is your life's work." "I'm getting older," Derek said, allowing a hint of weariness to creep into his voice. "And I want to enjoy my family while I can. Tyler's growing up fast, and Ashley..." He reached across the table to squeeze his wife's hand. She didn't pull away, but her fingers were cold as ice. "I want to travel with my beautiful wife. See the world beyond balance sheets and board meetings." Ashley's smile was radiant and completely false. "Derek, that sounds wonderful, but this is such a big decision. Shouldn't we discuss this privately first?" "Actually," Derek said, opening the folder, "I've already had the preliminary papers drawn up. Of course, there are conditions." Brad's eyes sharpened. "What kind of conditions?" Derek slid the documents across the table. "Standard partnership agreement. Brad would take over day-to-day operations immediately. I'd retain voting rights on major decisions for the first year, then gradually transfer full control. The only significant clause is the morality provision." "Morality provision?" Ashley asked, her voice carefully neutral. "If either partner engages in conduct that materially damages the company's reputation or violates the trust necessary for effective partnership." Derek paused, meeting Brad's eyes directly. "The other partner can terminate the agreement and buy out the offending party's shares at fair market value." Brad relaxed visibly. "That seems reasonable. What constitutes conduct that damages the company?" Derek's smile was cold. "Fraud, embezzlement, criminal activity, public scandal that affects our relationships with investors or clients. Anything that breaks the trust between partners." You could see Brad's mind working, calculating angles and risks. The younger man was probably thinking about his careful planning, how he'd avoided leaving paper trails, how he'd been discreet about the affair. "I'd like to review this with my attorney," Brad said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But I'd like an answer by the end of the week." Derek stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "I'm hoping to make the announcement at the board meeting next month." As they gathered their things, Derek noticed Ashley and Brad carefully avoid looking at each other. Good. They were off balance, uncertain whether this was a trap or an unexpected gift. After they left, Derek made a phone call to his head of security, a former FBI agent named Rodriguez who'd helped Derek investigate the affair. "Rodriguez, I need you to increase surveillance on both targets. I want to know every conversation, every meeting, every breath they take over the next week." "Already on it, boss. They're going to slip up." Derek's second call was to his lawyer. "Mitchell, did you include the additional clause we discussed? The one about partnership dissolution in cases of adultery?" "Yes, though it's buried in subsection 7 of the morality provisions. They'll need to read very carefully to spot it." Derek's third call was to his private investigator. "I need you to prepare the comprehensive evidence package. Photos, videos, financial records, communication logs, everything. But I want to present it in a very specific way." As Derek hung up, he walked to his window overlooking the city skyline. Each building represented years of his blood, sweat, and calculated risks. He'd built this empire from nothing, and now two people he'd trusted most in the world thought they could steal it from him. They were about to learn that Derek Thornton's mercy was as non-existent as his forgiveness. In his desk drawer, Derek pulled out a small digital recorder. For the past month, he'd been having very interesting conversations with several of Brad's former business partners. It seemed Brad had a pattern of betraying trust, though he'd been more careful in previous situations. Derek wasn't interested in previous situations. He was interested in complete and total destruction. His phone buzzed with a text from Ashley, "Home late tonight. Board meeting prep with Brad." Derek typed back, "Of course, darling. Take all the time you need." Then he deleted the message and opened his laptop to review the final phases of his plan. They thought they were the hunters. They were about to discover they'd been the prey all along. Chapter 3. The Trap Springs. Derek stood in the shadows of the parking garage beneath Brad's downtown penthouse, watching as Ashley's silver Mercedes pulled into the reserved space next to Brad's black BMW. It was 8:47 p.m. on a Thursday, their regular meeting time, according to the surveillance reports. 3 months had passed since Derek's partnership offer, and Brad had signed the papers with barely contained excitement. The morality clause had been reviewed by Brad's attorney, who'd missed the adultery subsection entirely. Derek's legal team had crafted it perfectly, hidden in plain sight among standard partnership language. Now, Derek had legal grounds for what was coming next. He watched Ashley and Brad embrace passionately as they entered the building's private elevator. Rodriguez's voice crackled through Derek's earpiece. "Audio and video feeds are active. We have everything we need." Derek's jaw clenched as he thought about the past 3 months of watching his wife lie to his face every single day. She'd been especially affectionate lately, perhaps sensing that something was shifting, or perhaps she felt guilty about what she was planning. The guilt, Derek knew, was about to become irrelevant. His phone buzzed with a call from Mitchell, his lawyer. "Derek, the board meeting is set for tomorrow at 2 p.m. I've sent the agenda to all members. They think it's a routine, quarterly review." "Perfect. And Tyler? He'll be in school. Ashley won't be able to reach him until after everything's finished." Derek hung up and made his way to his car. Phase 1 was complete. He had legal grounds to destroy Brad financially. Phase 2 was about to begin. The next morning, Derek sat across from Ashley at breakfast, watching her scroll through her phone while picking at a croissant. Tyler had already left for school, complaining about a history test he'd forgotten to study for. "You seem distracted," Derek observed. Ashley looked up with a bright smile. "Just reviewing some charity committee notes. We're planning the annual gala, and there are so many details to coordinate." Derek nodded thoughtfully. "You work so hard for those charities. I hope they appreciate your dedication." "Of course they do." Ashley's phone buzzed, and Derek caught a glimpse of Brad's name on the screen before she casually flipped it face down. "Actually, I might need to attend a planning meeting tonight. It could run late. Another late meeting, Derek said mildly. You've had quite a few of those lately. For just a moment, Ashley's composure cracked. Derek saw something flicker across her face. Fear, perhaps, or calculation. Well, you know how these society ladies can be. Everything has to be perfect. Derek stood and kissed her forehead gently. I know, darling. I'll see you tonight. As he left for the office, Derek's mind was already 3 steps ahead. By tonight, Ashley would understand exactly how perfect his own planning had been. At 2 p.m. sharp, Derek entered the boardroom where Thornton Hotel's 5-member board of directors waited. These weren't ceremonial positions. Each member represented significant investment capital and had real power over the company's direction. Gentlemen, Derek began, taking his seat at the head of the table. Thank you for attending on short notice. I have some urgent matters to discuss regarding Brad Sinclair's partnership agreement. Board member Harrison Webb, a silver-haired former banking executive, frowned. I thought that partnership was already finalized. It was. However, new information has come to light that triggers the morality clause in our agreement. Derek activated the wall-mounted screen and began his presentation. The first image was a high-resolution photograph of Brad and Ashley entering the downtown penthouse together. 3 months ago, I offered Brad Sinclair a 50-50 partnership in this company. As part of that agreement, he accepted certain behavioral standards designed to protect our company's reputation and the trust necessary for effective partnership. The next slide showed financial records. These documents prove that Mr. Sinclair has been systematically sharing confidential business information with his personal associates, including details about our expansion plans and investor relationships. Derek's voice remained calm and professional as he continued. Furthermore, Mr. Sinclair has been conducting an intimate relationship with my wife, Ashley Thornton, in a property owned by this company, during company time, while using company resources to coordinate their meetings. The room fell silent. Derek could see the board members' faces shifting from confusion to understanding to anger. The evidence is comprehensive, Derek continued, advancing through slides of photographs, phone records, and financial documentation. Mr. Sinclair has violated both the specific terms of our partnership agreement and the fundamental trust that our business relationships require. Webb leaned forward. Derek, this is devastating. What are you proposing? I'm invoking the immediate termination clause of our partnership agreement. As of this moment, Brad Sinclair is no longer a partner in Thornton Hotels. Security is currently removing him from the building and revoking all his access credentials. Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. Package delivered. Target is in the lobby demanding to see you. Gentlemen, Mr. Sinclair is about to demand access to this meeting. I suggest we adjourn so you can review the complete evidence package individually. I'll be available for questions once you've had time to process this information. As the board members filed out in stunned silence, Derek remained seated, savoring the moment. Through the building security cameras, he could see Brad Sinclair in the lobby, his face red with fury, arguing with security guards who were politely but firmly denying him access. Derek's intercom buzzed. Mr. Thornton, there's a Brad Sinclair here demanding to see you. Tell Mr. Sinclair that all future communications should go through his attorney. He no longer has any business relationship with this company. Derek gathered his papers and walked to the elevator. As the doors closed, he could hear Brad shouting his name from the lobby. Phase 2 was complete. Brad Sinclair had just lost his partnership, his income, and his future in a single afternoon. But Derek wasn't finished. Phase 3 would destroy them both in ways they couldn't imagine. And Phase 4, well, that would have to wait 8 years for Tyler to make his move. Derek smiled as the elevator carried him toward the final act of his carefully orchestrated revenge. Chapter 4. The Exile. 8 years had passed since Derek Thornton had systematically destroyed Brad Sinclair's life and driven Ashley into exile. Now 50, Derek sat in his expanded study, reviewing quarterly reports from his hotel empire that had tripled in size during those years. The walls displayed photos from his business achievements, but notably absent were any family pictures. The divorce had been swift and brutal. Ashley had tried to fight for custody of Tyler, but Derek's evidence of her adultery and abandonment of her maternal duties had been overwhelming. The judge had been particularly unimpressed with the revelation that Ashley had been planning to relocate to California with Brad, effectively removing Tyler from his father's life without consent. Tyler, who had been 14 at the time, had chosen his side immediately and definitively. "Dad," he'd said the night Derek had shown him the evidence, "I already knew. I saw them together months ago, but I didn't know how to tell you." That conversation had been one of Derek's few moments of genuine emotion during the entire ordeal. His son had been protecting him, carrying the burden of knowledge that would have destroyed most teenagers. But Tyler wasn't most teenagers. He was Derek's son. Derek's private investigator had tracked Ashley and Brad to San Diego, where they'd attempted to start a boutique consulting firm. Within 6 months, Derek had ensured that every major client they'd approached received detailed information about Brad's history of business betrayal and Ashley's marital infidelity. Their fledgling business had collapsed before it truly began. Brad had found work as a mid-level sales manager for a competing hotel chain, while Ashley had taken a position with a local charity organization. Derek's long reach in the hospitality industry had ensured that Brad's advancement opportunities remained permanently limited. As for Ashley, Derek's connections in the philanthropy world had made her persona non grata at any organization with serious funding. They weren't destitute, but they were exactly what Derek had intended them to become: irrelevant. Derek's phone interrupted his thoughts. The caller ID showed Tyler's number, which was unusual since his son typically texted unless something was urgent. "Tyler, Dad, we need to talk. I'm coming over." The line went dead before Derek could respond. He glanced at his watch, 9:30 p.m. Tyler, now 22 and completing his MBA at Wharton, rarely made unscheduled visits during the semester. 20 minutes later, Tyler entered the study without knocking, a privilege only he held in Derek's carefully controlled world. But something was different about his son's demeanor. The confident young man who'd been Derek's closest ally for 8 years looked nervous, almost guilty. "What's wrong?" Derek asked directly. Tyler sat down heavily in the leather chair across from Derek's desk. "I've been in contact with Mom." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. His expression didn't change, but his grip tightened on his bourbon glass. "For how long?" 6 months. Tyler's voice was steady, but Derek could see the tension in his shoulders. "She reached out when I turned 22. Said she wanted to explain her side of what happened." Derek set down his glass with deliberate care. "And what did she explain?" "She told me about Brad, about the affair. She doesn't deny any of that." Tyler leaned forward, his blue eyes, Ashley's eyes, meeting Derek's. "But she also told me about you, about the things you did after the divorce. Such as, she told me you destroyed their business systematically, that you used your connections to make sure Brad could never advance in his career, that you had them followed, harassed, blacklisted." Tyler's voice gained strength. "She told me you didn't just win the divorce. You tried to destroy their entire lives." Derek's laugh was cold and sharp. "And you believe her?" "I had it investigated." The room fell silent. Derek studied his son's face, seeing a determination that reminded him painfully of himself at that age. "You had it investigated," Derek repeated slowly. "I hired my own private investigator. I wanted to know the truth." Tyler pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "Do you want to know what I found?" Derek didn't respond, but Tyler continued anyway. "I found out that Mom was right about most of it. You did destroy their business. You did have Brad blacklisted. You've been monitoring their lives for 8 years. Tyler's voice hardened. "But I also found out things she didn't tell me." Tyler opened the folder and placed several photographs on Derek's desk. "I found out that Brad has been physically abusing her for the past 5 years. That she's been hospitalized twice for accidents that look suspiciously like domestic violence. That she's been trying to leave him, but can't because you've made sure she has no resources and no support system." Derek looked at the photographs without emotion. They showed Ashley with bruises, medical records, police reports that had been filed and mysteriously dropped. "And?" Derek asked. Tyler stared at his father in disbelief. "And? Dad, she's being beaten by the man she chose over our family. And your response is, and?" She made her choice 8 years ago. The consequences of that choice are not my responsibility. Tyler stood up abruptly. Jesus Christ, Dad. I know she hurt you. I know she betrayed us both. But she's still a human being. She's still my mother. Derek's voice remained perfectly controlled. Your mother chose to abandon you for another man. She chose to betray the family that gave her everything. She chose to conspire against the business I built with my own hands. Derek stood as well, his presence imposing even across the desk. The fact that her choices led to consequences she didn't anticipate is not my concern. She wants to see you, Tyler said quietly. She wants to apologize. She wants to try to rebuild some kind of relationship with both of us. No, Dad, no. Derek's voice cut through the room like a blade. I told you 8 years ago, and I'm telling you now, I do not forgive betrayal. Ever. Under any circumstances. Tyler gathered the photographs and put them back in his folder. What if I told you that I'm planning to help her leave Brad? That I'm going to support her while she gets back on her feet? Derek's eyes narrowed. Then I would tell you that you're free to make that choice. But you should understand the consequences of that choice. What consequences? Derek walked to his wall safe and removed a thick legal document. This is my will, Tyler. As of today, you inherit everything. The hotels, the real estate, the investment portfolio, the offshore accounts. Everything I've built over the past 30 years. He placed the document on his desk. But my will contains a very specific clause. If you choose to provide material support to Ashley Thornton or Brad Sinclair, if you choose to rebuild a relationship with them against my explicit wishes, you forfeit your inheritance entirely. Tyler's face went pale. You're threatening to disinherit me? I'm offering you a choice. The same choice your mother had 8 years ago. Loyalty to this family or loyalty to the people who betrayed it. Derek returned the document to his safe. You have until your graduation to decide. If you choose to help your mother, I'll respect that decision. But I'll also honor my own principles. Tyler walked toward the door, then stopped. What happened to you, Dad? When did you become so cold that you can't forgive your own family? Derek didn't answer until Tyler's hand was on the doorknob. I became this way the day I learned that the people I trusted most in the world were planning to destroy everything I'd worked for. I became this way the day I realized that love and loyalty are weaknesses that people will exploit without hesitation. Derek's voice was quiet but deadly serious. I became this way so that no one could ever hurt me again. Tyler left without another word, and Derek returned to his desk. Outside his window, the city lights stretched toward the horizon, each one representing something he'd built or conquered. In 6 months, Tyler would graduate from business school. In 6 months, Derek would discover whether his son had inherited his principles or his mother's weaknesses. In 6 months, Derek would learn whether his carefully constructed world would survive its next betrayal. Chapter 5. The Long Game. 5 years had passed since Tyler's ultimatum, and Derek Thornton sat in his private study reviewing the latest reports on his expanding hotel empire. At 55, his hair was silver at the temples, but his mind remained as sharp and ruthless as ever. The company now operated in 12 countries, with assets exceeding $2 billion. Tyler had made his choice, and it hadn't surprised Derek. His son had graduated from Wharton with highest honors, then immediately used his trust fund, money Derek couldn't legally block, to relocate Ashley to a safe house in Denver and pay for her medical treatment and therapy. Tyler had also ensured that Brad Sinclair was arrested for domestic violence, though the charges had eventually been dropped due to Ashley's reluctance to testify. Derek had watched it all unfold with clinical detachment. When Tyler had called to inform him of his decision, Derek had listened in silence, then hung up without a word. 3 days later, Tyler received official notification that he had been removed from Derek's will and that all future financial support had been terminated. The young man who had once been Derek's greatest pride and chosen successor had become just another casualty of Derek's unbending principles. Tyler had tried to call, text, and email for months afterward. He'd even flown to the city and attempted to visit Derek's office, only to be informed by security that he was no longer welcome on company property. Derek had watched the security footage of his son, standing in a lobby, looking lost and desperate, but he'd felt nothing. Derek Thornton did not forgive betrayal. Not from business partners, not from wives, and not from sons. The irony was that Tyler had inherited more of Derek's qualities than either of them had realized. Within 3 years of being cut off, Tyler had founded his own boutique investment firm specializing in hospitality acquisitions. The firm was small but successful, and Tyler had proven himself to be every bit as ruthless and strategic as his father. Derek knew this because he'd been monitoring Tyler's progress through third-party sources. Not out of paternal pride or concern, but because Derek monitored all potential business threats. And Tyler was definitely becoming a threat. Derek's intercom buzzed. "Mr. Thornton, there's a Mitchell Hayes on line 1. He says it's urgent." Derek frowned. Mitchell had been his personal attorney for 15 years, handling everything from corporate law to his divorce. Urgent calls at 8 p.m. were unusual. "Derek." Mitchell's voice sounded strained when Derek picked up. "We have a problem. Tyler just filed a lawsuit against you." Derek leaned back in his chair. "What kind of lawsuit?" "He's claiming that you used undue influence to coerce him into signing away his inheritance rights. He's arguing that the ultimatum you gave him constituted emotional duress and that the disinheritance is legally invalid." Derek's laugh was cold. "He signed those papers voluntarily. We have witnesses. It's more complicated than that. Tyler's legal team has assembled a very sophisticated argument about parental manipulation and psychological coercion. They're claiming that your pattern of controlling behavior throughout his childhood created a power dynamic that made true consent impossible." Derek stood and walked to his window. "What are they asking for?" "Complete restoration of his inheritance rights, plus damages for 8 years of financial hardship and emotional distress." "Derek, if they win, they could claim everything: the hotels, the real estate, the offshore accounts." "Who's representing him?" "That's the other problem. He's hired Lawson and Associates." Derek's jaw tightened. Lawson and Associates was one of the most prestigious family law firms in the country, specializing in complex inheritance disputes. They were expensive, highly skilled, and had a reputation for taking on cases they believed they could win. How is he affording Lawson and Associates? Mitchell's pause was telling. "Derek, there's something else. Tyler isn't just suing for his inheritance. He's also filed a motion for immediate access to your financial records, claiming he needs them to prove the extent of his damages." Derek's mind began working through the implications. Tyler wasn't just trying to reclaim his inheritance. He was trying to gain access to Derek's complete financial structure. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the complex web of holdings that Derek had spent decades constructing. "He's planning a takeover," Derek said quietly. "That's what I'm afraid of. If he gets access to your financial records and wins the inheritance case, he could effectively control your entire empire." Derek set down the phone and walked to his safe. Inside were documents he'd hoped never to use, contingency plans he developed over the years for various worst-case scenarios. One folder was labeled simply Tyler. Derek had always known this day might come. Tyler was his son, after all, and Derek had trained him too well to expect simple acceptance of defeat. But Derek had been planning for this possibility for 8 years. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd memorized but never used. "Rodriguez, I need you to activate Protocol 7. "Are you sure, boss?" "Protocol 7 is pretty extreme." Derek looked out at the city lights that represented his empire. "Tyler wants to play with the big boys. It's time he learned what that really means." Derek hung up and opened his laptop. There were phone calls to make, documents to transfer, and accounts to relocate. Tyler thought he was launching a surprise attack, but he was about to discover that Derek Thornton had been preparing for war since the day his son chose betrayal over loyalty. As Derek began typing, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Dad, I'm sorry it's come to this, but you left me no choice. I'll see you in court. Tyler." Derek stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Tomorrow, Tyler would discover that declaring war on Derek Thornton was very different from surviving it. The long game Derek had been playing was about to reach its conclusion, and Tyler was about to learn why his father had never lost a fight that truly mattered. Chapter 6. The Counterstrike. Derek Thornton stood in the conference room of his corporate headquarters at 6 a.m., reviewing the overnight reports from his legal team. 3 weeks had passed since Tyler's lawsuit had been filed, and Derek's counter-strategy was now ready for implementation. The room's mahogany table was covered with documents, financial records, and legal briefs. Derek's team consisted of 5 attorneys from different firms, 2 forensic accountants, and his head of security. Each had been working around the clock to prepare what Derek privately called the education of Tyler Thornton. Status report, Derek said without preamble. His lead attorney, Patricia Morrison from Blackstone & Associates, spoke first. Tyler's legal team has filed motions for discovery on all your financial holdings. They want complete access to your business records, personal accounts, and offshore holdings going back 20 years. Derek nodded. Expected. What's our response? We're filing counter motions claiming attorney-client privilege on business communications, and we're arguing that Tyler's claims of emotional distress are fabricated. But Derek, they have a strong case on the undue influence angle. Derek's forensic accountant, a former IRS investigator named Shun, spoke next. Tyler's funding for this lawsuit is interesting. He's not just using his investment firm's resources. Someone else is backing this play. Who? Chun slid a folder across the table. We traced the payments to Lawson and Associates back to their source. Tyler's being funded by a consortium of investors who specialize in hostile takeovers of family businesses. They're betting that if Tyler wins, they can force you to sell company assets to pay the judgment. Derek's smile was predatory. So Tyler isn't just trying to reclaim his inheritance. He's trying to destroy the company entirely. It appears so. If they win and the judgment is large enough, you'd be forced to liquidate significant assets to pay it. Tyler's investors would then have opportunities to purchase those assets at below-market prices. Derek turned to Rodriguez, his security chief. Protocol 7 status? Fully operational. We've documented Tyler's association with the investment consortium, and we've traced their funding sources back to some very interesting places. Rodriguez placed a thick folder on the table. Derek, Tyler's investors aren't just vulture capitalists. 2 of them have connections to organized crime families in Las Vegas and Miami. They specialize in using legal pressure to force business owners into situations where they have to sell to criminal enterprises for laundering purposes. The room fell silent. Derek's expression didn't change, but everyone present understood the implications. Tyler doesn't know about the criminal connections, Rodriguez continued. Our surveillance suggests he believes he's working with legitimate investors. But if this lawsuit succeeds, he'll be handing your empire over to people who will use it for money laundering and other illegal activities. Derek walked to the window overlooking the city. How long before Tyler discovers what he's gotten himself into? Based on our projections, about 6 months. Once the investors realize they can't control you through legal means, they'll start pressuring Tyler to take more aggressive actions. When Tyler refuses, they'll either cut him loose or... Rodriguez didn't finish the sentence. Or they'll eliminate him as a liability, Derek said quietly. Patricia Morrison leaned forward. Derek, we need to discuss strategy. Do you want to warn Tyler about what he's gotten himself into? Derek's laugh was cold. Tyler made his choice 8 years ago when he chose to support his mother over his family. He made another choice 3 weeks ago when he decided to sue me. Now he's made a third choice by accepting money from criminals to fund his attack on everything I've built. Derek turned back to face the room. Tyler is a grown man who believes he's smarter than everyone around him. He's about to learn the consequences of that arrogance. What are your instructions? Patricia asked. Derek returned to his seat at the head of the table. We're going to give Tyler exactly what he's asking for. We'll provide complete financial disclosure as requested. We'll cooperate fully with discovery. We'll make this the most transparent legal proceeding in corporate history. The attorneys exchanged confused glances. Chin was the first to speak. Derek, if you provide complete disclosure, Tyler will be able to see your entire financial structure. That will give him enormous leverage. Exactly. Derek's smile was deadly. Tyler wants to know how my empire works? I'm going to show him. Every account, every investment, every transaction. And when he sees the complete picture, he's going to realize that destroying me means destroying himself. Derek stood and walked to his personal safe, removing a document folder he'd been preparing for years. Gentlemen, Tyler believes he's inherited my strategic mind, but not my principles. He thinks he can outmaneuver me, using my own lessons against me. Derek placed the folder on the table. He's about to discover that every lesson I taught him was designed with this moment in mind. Derek opened the folder to reveal a complex organizational chart showing the true structure of his business empire. What Tyler didn't know, what no one except Derek and his most trusted advisors knew, was that Tyler had never actually been removed from Derek's inheritance. He'd been moved. For the past 8 years, Derek explained, I've been transferring assets into irrevocable trusts that name Tyler as the ultimate beneficiary. Not Tyler the son, but Tyler the business entity. Every major acquisition, every profitable venture, every growth opportunity has been structured so that Tyler will inherit it automatically upon my death. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Tyler's lawsuit, if successful, won't give him control of my empire, Derek continued. It will trigger clauses in dozens of trust agreements that will immediately transfer ownership to him, whether he wants it or not. And because of his association with criminal investors, Tyler will find himself personally liable for any illegal activities those investors attempt to conduct using my assets. Patricia Morrison stared at the documents in amazement. Derek, this is incredible. You've been planning Tyler's inheritance for 8 years while simultaneously punishing him for betraying you. I've been preparing Tyler to inherit an empire, Derek corrected. But I've also been ensuring that he can only inherit it on my terms, with my principles, and with complete understanding of what it means to be Derek Thornton's son. Derek gathered the documents and returned them to his safe. Tyler wants a war? He can have one. But he's about to learn that in any war with Derek Thornton, the only way to win is to become Derek Thornton. As the meeting adjourned, Derek remained alone in the conference room, looking out at the city his empire dominated. In 6 months, Tyler would realize that his lawsuit had been a trap designed to force him back into Derek's world. And by then, it would be too late for Tyler to escape the destiny Derek had been constructing for him since the day he chose betrayal over loyalty. Derek Thornton's son was about to learn that some inheritances came with a price that couldn't be refused. Chapter 7. The Inheritance Trap. Derek Thornton sat in his study at 3 a.m., reading the final reports from his legal team. The lawsuit had been proceeding for 6 months, and Tyler's discovery requests had been granted by the court. Tomorrow, Derek would be required to provide complete financial disclosure of his empire. Every account, every holding, every carefully constructed layer of his business structure. Tyler had no idea he was about to walk into the most elegant trap Derek had ever constructed. Derek's phone buzzed with a secure message from Rodriguez. Target has discovered investor connections. Meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning before court. Derek smiled coldly. Tyler had finally realized what kind of people were funding his lawsuit. The young man who thought he could outmaneuver his father was about to learn that Derek had been orchestrating every move of this chess game from the beginning. At 8 a.m., Derek arrived at the courthouse for what would be the final phase of Tyler's legal education. He wore his most expensive suit and carried a briefcase containing documents that would change both their lives forever. Tyler was already in the courtroom with his legal team, and Derek could see the strain on his son's face. The confident young man who had filed this lawsuit 6 months ago looked older, more desperate, and finally beginning to understand the forces he'd unleashed. Judge Catherine Walsh called the proceedings to order. Mr. Thornton, the court has ordered you to provide complete financial disclosure. Are you prepared to comply? Derek stood. Yes, Your Honor. In fact, I'm prepared to exceed the court's requirements. He opened his briefcase and removed a thick binder. Your Honor, this document contains not only my complete financial holdings, but also the legal structures I've established over the past 8 years to ensure the proper succession of my business empire. Tyler's lead attorney looked confused. Your Honor, we weren't seeking information about succession planning. Nevertheless, Derek said, I believe it's relevant to my son's claims about his inheritance rights. Derek handed copies of the document to Tyler's legal team and began his testimony. Your Honor, 8 years ago, my son Tyler made certain choices that led me to remove him from my will. However, what Tyler doesn't understand is that I never actually disinherited him. Tyler's head snapped up, his eyes wide with confusion. Derek continued. Instead, I restructured my entire empire to ensure that Tyler would inherit everything, but only under specific circumstances that would guarantee he understood the full responsibilities of that inheritance. Derek's attorney, Patricia Morrison, stood. Your Honor, Mr. Thornton would like to present Exhibit A, the Thornton Family Trust Network. The court clerk distributed copies of a complex organizational chart that showed the true structure of Derek's business empire. What everyone saw was a web of trusts, holding companies, and subsidiaries that defied easy comprehension. Over the past 8 years, Derek explained, I have transferred approximately 90% of my assets into a network of irrevocable trusts. These trusts are structured so that Tyler Thornton automatically becomes the beneficiary and controlling trustee under 2 specific conditions. Derek's voice remained calm and professional as he delivered the killing blow. First, if Tyler initiates legal action to claim his inheritance, which he has done through this lawsuit. Second, if Tyler demonstrates his willingness to ally himself with criminal enterprises to achieve his goals, which he has done by accepting funding from investors with documented connections to organized crime. The courtroom erupted. Tyler's attorneys were frantically flipping through documents, trying to understand what Derek had just revealed. Tyler himself looked like he'd been physically struck. Judge Walsh banged her gavel. Order. Mr. Thornton, are you claiming that this lawsuit has triggered automatic inheritance provisions? Yes, Your Honor. As of this morning, Tyler Thornton legally owns controlling interests in Thornton Hotels, Thornton Real Estate Holdings, Thornton Investment Group, and 17 subsidiary companies. The total value of these assets is approximately $2 billion. Derek turned to look directly at Tyler. However, there are certain conditions attached to this inheritance that Tyler needs to understand. Patricia Morrison handed Derek another document. Your Honor, the trust agreements contain specific provisions regarding criminal liability and business practices. Derek's voice took on a harder edge. Because Tyler has accepted funding from investors with criminal connections, he is now personally liable for any illegal activities those investors attempt to conduct using assets Tyler now controls. Furthermore, the trust agreements require Tyler to immediately terminate all relationships with these investors and assume full personal responsibility for the empire he now owns. Tyler finally found his voice. What were you saying? Derek's smile was cold and triumphant. I'm saying you've gotten exactly what you wanted, Tyler. You now own everything I've built, but you own it under my terms, according to my principles, and with full understanding of what it means to be Derek Thornton's successor. Derek stood and walked toward Tyler's table. You wanted to destroy me to claim your inheritance? Congratulations. You've just inherited the responsibility of protecting $2 billion in assets from the criminals you brought into our lives. Tyler's lead attorney stood. Your Honor, this is clearly some kind of manipulation. Actually, Judge Walsh interrupted, having reviewed the trust documents. This appears to be entirely legal. Mr. Thornton has created a complex but valid succession structure that automatically transfers ownership based on specific triggering events. Derek returned to his seat. Tyler, your criminal investors expect their return on investment. They've funded your lawsuit with the expectation that you would either gain control of my assets or force me to liquidate them. Now that you control those assets, they're going to expect you to deliver on their investment. Derek's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The question is, Tyler, what are you going to do when they demand that you use Thornton Hotels for money laundering? What are you going to do when they insist that you provide them with access to our offshore accounts? What are you going to do when they realize that the only way to get their return is to eliminate the inconvenient son who now owns everything they want? Tyler's face went pale as the full implications hit him. Derek stood to leave. Your Honor, I believe this concludes the proceedings. Tyler has his inheritance. Now he gets to learn what it actually costs to be Derek Thornton's son. As Derek walked toward the courtroom door, Tyler called out desperately, "Dad! Dad, wait!" Derek stopped, but didn't turn around. "You made your choice 8 years ago, Tyler. You made another choice 6 months ago. Now you get to live with the consequences of those choices." Derek left the courtroom, knowing that Tyler was finally about to understand the difference between inheriting power and earning the right to wield it. Outside the courthouse, Derek's phone was already ringing with calls from Tyler's criminal investors. They wanted to know what had happened in court, and they wanted to schedule immediate meetings with their new business partner. Derek answered the first call with a smile. "This is Derek Thornton. I'm afraid you'll need to speak with Tyler now. He's the owner of everything you're interested in." Tyler Thornton had spent 8 years believing he could outmaneuver his father. Now he was about to learn that Derek's greatest revenge was giving Tyler exactly what he thought he wanted. Chapter 8: The Prodigal's Return. 3 years had passed since the courtroom revelation that had transformed Tyler from plaintiff to inheritor overnight. Derek Thornton, now 58, stood in his private study, now significantly smaller since most of his assets had transferred to Tyler's control, reviewing security reports that had become his primary source of entertainment. Tyler had survived his criminal investors, but barely. The young man who had thought he could play in Derek's world had learned within weeks that inheriting an empire and controlling it were vastly different skills. The criminal consortium that had funded his lawsuit had expected immediate returns on their investment, and Tyler's refusal to use company assets for money laundering had triggered exactly the kind of response Derek had predicted. 2 attempts on Tyler's life, 1 kidnapping of his girlfriend, and a coordinated attack on multiple hotel properties had taught Tyler everything he needed to know about the true cost of power. To his credit, Tyler had fought back with tactics that would have made Derek proud. He'd used his inherited resources to hire private military contractors, had systematically exposed his former investors to federal authorities, and had ruthlessly eliminated every threat to his business empire. The young man Derek had raised had finally emerged from the naive idealist who'd chosen betrayal over loyalty. But the cost had been devastating. Tyler had lost his girlfriend, who'd left him after the kidnapping. He'd been forced to kill 2 men in self-defense. He'd watched 3 of his hotels burn to the ground and had seen loyal employees murdered for refusing to provide information to his enemies. Derek had observed it all from a distance, providing no assistance and offering no comfort. Now Tyler controlled the empire Derek had built, but he controlled alone, just as Derek always had. Derek's contemplation was interrupted by his doorbell, an unusual occurrence since his penthouse apartment required security clearance to access. Derek checked his monitors and saw a familiar figure standing in his hallway. Tyler Thornton, now 25, looked like a different person from the confident young man who'd filed a lawsuit 3 years ago. His face was harder, his eyes colder, his posture that of someone who'd learned to sleep with one eye open. Derek opened the door without speaking. "Dad," Tyler said simply. "Tyler." They stood in the doorway for a long moment, 2 men who shared everything and nothing. "May I come in?" Derek stepped aside wordlessly. Tyler entered the apartment and looked around at the space that was elegant, but significantly smaller than Derek's former estate. "Nice place. Smaller than I expected. I find I need less space these days," Derek replied. "Most of my assets are elsewhere now." Tyler nodded, understanding the reference. "I try to give it back, after I realized what you'd done. I try to transfer everything back to you." Derek poured 2 glasses of bourbon and handed one to Tyler. "But you couldn't. The trust structures are ironclad. Once triggered, they can't be reversed." Tyler took a sip and winced slightly. "You really thought of everything." They moved to Derek's living room, sitting across from each other like negotiators rather than family. "Why are you here, Tyler?" Tyler stared into his bourbon for a long moment before answering. "Because I need to tell you that you were right." Derek's expression didn't change, but he gestured for Tyler to continue. "You were right about loyalty. You were right about betrayal. You were right about the cost of power and the price of weakness." Tyler's voice was steady but tired. "You were right about everything." Derek sipped his bourbon and waited. "I spent 3 years learning lessons you tried to teach me in one conversation 8 years ago," Tyler continued. "I had to watch good people die because I was naive enough to think I could play games with criminals. I had to become someone I didn't recognize just to survive the world I thought I was smart enough to navigate. Tyler stood and walked to Derek's window, looking out at the city lights below. I became you, Dad. Ruthless, calculating, incapable of trusting anyone completely. And the worst part is, I understand now why you had to become that way. Derek joined Tyler at the window. What happened to Ashley? Tyler's jaw tightened. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. She tried to reach out to both of us before she died, but Tyler's voice trailed off. But neither of us would take her calls, Derek finished. I went to her funeral, Tyler said quietly. Brad was there. He looked broken old. He tried to apologize to me for everything that happened. What did you tell him? Tyler's smile was cold and familiar. I told him that some things can't be forgiven. Derek nodded approvingly. Dad, Tyler said, turned to face him. I understand now why you did what you did. The trap, the inheritance, everything. You weren't just punishing me for betraying you. You were preparing me for what it really means to carry our name. Derek set down his bourbon glass. And what does it mean? It means being alone. It means never fully trusting anyone. It means making decisions that other people will call cruel or heartless because those are the only decisions that protect what matters. Tyler's voice grew stronger. It means understanding that family loyalty isn't about love, it's about survival. Derek studied his son's face, seeing his own hardness reflected there. You've learned well. I had a good teacher. They stood in silence for several minutes, watching the city Derek had once dominated and Tyler now controlled. There's something else, Tyler said finally. I have a son. Derek's expression flickered for just a moment. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. His name is Derek. He's 6 months old. Tyler's voice softened slightly. His mother and I aren't together. She couldn't handle what my life became, but she agreed to let me raise him. Tyler turned to face Derek directly. I want him to know his grandfather, and I want you to help me teach him what it really means to be a Thornton. Derek was quiet for a long time, processing this information. You want me to help you raise him the way I raised you? Derek asked finally. I want you to help me raise him the way you should have raised me from the beginning, Tyler corrected. With no illusions about the world we live in. No false beliefs about loyalty or forgiveness. No naive faith in other people's goodness. Derek walked to his safe and removed a photograph he'd kept hidden for 8 years. A picture of Tyler at 14, standing beside Derek at a company board meeting. In the photo, Tyler was smiling with genuine happiness and pride. Derek looked at the photograph, then at the hardened man his son had become. Tyler, Derek said carefully, are you asking me to help you destroy your son's innocence the way I destroyed yours? Tyler's answer was immediate and unflinching. I'm asking you to help me prepare him for the world that will try to destroy him, whether he's innocent or not. Derek placed the photograph on his coffee table where both men could see it. When do I meet my grandson? Tyler's smile was the first genuine expression Derek had seen from him since he'd entered the apartment. Tomorrow, if you're free. But Dad, Tyler's voice took on the same hard edge Derek recognized from his own speech. If you're going to be part of his life, you need to understand something. I won't make the mistakes you made with me. I won't let sentiment or false hope cloud my judgment. My son will learn our lessons, but he'll learn them from strength, not from betrayal. Derek extended his hand to Tyler, not as a father to his son, but as one businessman acknowledging another. Welcome home, Tyler. As they shook hands, Derek realized that his greatest triumph wasn't the empire he'd built or the enemies he'd destroyed. It was standing in his living room, looking into the face of a man who had finally become worthy of carrying the Thornton name. The prodigal son had returned, but he'd returned as Derek's equal, not his heir. And tomorrow, Derek would meet the next generation of Thornton men, a grandson who would learn from both their mistakes and their victories. The cycle was beginning again, but this time, they would build it together. Chapter 9, Blood and Legacy. Derek Thornton stood in the nursery of Tyler's penthouse apartment, holding 6-month-old Derek Thornton III. A child who would grow up knowing truths that had taken his father and grandfather decades to learn through pain and betrayal. The baby had Derek's dark hair and Tyler's blue eyes, and when he gripped Derek's finger with surprising strength, The old man felt something he'd thought was permanently dead inside him. Hope for the future rather than merely satisfaction with the past. He's strong, Derek observed, watching his grandson's alert gaze track movements around the room. He'll need to be, Tyler replied, reviewing documents at a nearby desk. Even in his son's nursery, Tyler maintained the hypervigilance that had kept him alive through 3 years of corporate warfare. Derek had spent the past 6 months rebuilding his relationship with Tyler, but it wasn't the warm reconciliation that Ashley might have hoped for years ago. Instead, it was a partnership between two men who understood power, respected ruthlessness, and shared an uncompromising view of human nature. Tyler had proven himself worthy of Derek's teachings by surviving every trial Derek had engineered for him. The criminal investors, the attempts on his life, the systematic destruction of everything he'd once believed about trust and loyalty. Tyler had emerged from it all as hard and unforgiving as Derek himself. More importantly, Tyler had learned to see Derek's original betrayal not as cruelty, but as preparation for a world that showed no mercy to the weak. Derek's reflection was interrupted by the sound of his secure phone ringing. Only 3 people had that number: Tyler, Rodriguez, and his lawyer. Rodriguez here, boss. We have a problem. Derek stepped out of the nursery to take the call privately. What kind of problem? Brad Sinclair is dead. Apparent suicide, but the circumstances are suspicious. Derek felt a cold satisfaction settle over him. Details. Found in his apartment this morning with a note confessing to the embezzlement of several $1 million from his current employer. But Derek, the embezzlement was discovered only yesterday, and the amount missing is exactly equal to the debt he owed to some very unfriendly people. Derek understood immediately. Someone staged this to make his death look like guilt-driven suicide rather than murder. That's what I'm thinking. And Derek, there's something else. Before he died, Brad tried to contact Tyler, left several voicemails about wanting to make things right and reveal the truth about what really happened. Derek's mind began calculating possibilities. What truth? Unknown. But Derek, if Brad had information that could have changed the narrative about what happened 8 years ago. It doesn't matter, Derek interrupted. Brad is dead. Ashley is dead. And Tyler has learned everything he needs to know about the cost of betrayal. Derek hung up and returned to the nursery, where Tyler was now holding his son. Bad news? Tyler asked, having obviously heard Derek's tone during the phone call. Brad Sinclair is dead. Apparent suicide. Tyler's expression didn't change. Good. Derek studied his son's face, looking for any trace of remorse or uncertainty. He found none. Tyler, don't you want to know why he died or what he might have wanted to tell you? Tyler looked up from his son to meet Derek's eyes. Dad, 8 years ago, Brad Sinclair chose to betray the man who trusted him most in the world. 3 years ago, he sat at my mother's funeral and tried to apologize for destroying our family. Last week, he apparently tried to contact me about making things right. Tyler's voice was completely calm. I don't care why he's dead. I don't care what secrets he took with him. I don't care what version of the truth he wanted to reveal. Brad Sinclair ceased to matter the moment he chose betrayal over loyalty. Derek nodded approvingly. And if you discovered that I had arranged his death? Tyler's smile was cold and familiar. Then I would congratulate you on finally closing a chapter that should have ended years ago. Derek reached into his jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. As it happens, I didn't arrange Brad's death, but I did arrange for this. He pressed play, and Brad Sinclair's voice filled the room, a recording from the night before his death. Tyler, I know you won't take my calls, but I need you to know the truth about your father. Derek Thornton is the most dangerous man I've ever known, and I'm not talking about business. I'm talking about what he did to your mother, what he did to me, and what he's probably planning to do to you. Tyler's expression remained unchanged as Brad's voice continued. Your father didn't just destroy our business. He systematically ruined every aspect of our lives for 8 years. He had us followed, harassed, blacklisted from everything. But worse than that, Tyler, he manipulated you. The whole inheritance trap, the criminal investors, everything that happened to you. Derek orchestrated all of it to force you back under his control. Derek watched Tyler's face carefully as Brad's recorded voice delivered his final accusation. Your father didn't just want revenge for our betrayal, Tyler. He wanted to prove that he could break you down and rebuild you in his image. Every lesson you learned, every hardship you endured, every person you lost, it was all part of Derek's design to create a successor who would be as ruthless and unforgiving as he is. The recording ended with Brad's voice breaking. I'm leaving town tomorrow. If something happens to me, if I disappear or die under suspicious circumstances, you'll know that Derek Thornton has finally eliminated the last witness to what he really is. Derek turned off the recorder and waited for Tyler's response. Tyler looked down at his son, then back at Derek. Is it true? Which part? All of it. Did you orchestrate everything that happened to me over the past 3 years? Derek's answer was immediate and unflinching. Yes. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, processing this confirmation of Brad's accusations. The criminal investors, the attempts on my life, everything I suffered, you planned it all? I created the conditions that made it inevitable, Derek corrected. You chose to file the lawsuit. You chose to accept money from criminals. You chose to fight rather than surrender. I simply ensured that you would face the full consequences of those choices. Tyler stood and placed his son in his crib, then turned to face Derek with an expression that was impossible to read. Why? Derek's voice was steady and certain. Because I needed to know if you were capable of becoming the man our family requires. Because I needed to know if you could survive in our world without the protection I'd always provided. Because I needed to know if you would choose strength over sentiment when your survival depended on it. Derek stepped closer to his son. Tyler, everything I did to you, the world would have done eventually. Every lesson you learned through pain and loss, you would have learned anyway, but you might have learned them too late to survive them. Tyler was silent for several minutes, looking down at his sleeping son. Finally, he spoke. So Brad was right. You manipulated me, broke me down, and rebuilt me to be your successor. Yes. Tyler nodded slowly. And if I had been weaker, if I had broken completely, you would have let me die rather than compromise your principles. Yes. Tyler's smile was sharp and cold. Good. Derek blinked in surprise. Good. Dad, for the past 6 months, I've been wondering if you'd gone soft. If becoming a grandfather might make you sentimental or weak. Tyler's voice carried the same hard certainty Derek recognized from his own speech. I'm relieved to know that you're still the man who taught me that survival requires absolute commitment to absolute principles. Tyler picked up his son and looked directly into Derek's eyes. My son will grow up knowing exactly what it means to be a Thornton. He'll understand from the beginning that the world is full of people like Brad Sinclair and Ashley Greenwood. People who will betray you the moment it serves their interests. Derek felt a pride so deep it was almost painful. And if he ever betrays you? Tyler's answer was immediate. Then I'll do to him what you did to me. I'll break him down and rebuild him, or I'll cut him loose entirely. Derek extended his hand to Tyler for the second time in 6 months, but this time it felt different. This wasn't reconciliation between father and son. It was recognition between equals. Welcome to the family business, Tyler. As they shook hands, Derek realized that his greatest victory wasn't the empire he'd built or the enemies he'd destroyed. It was standing in his grandson's nursery, looking at a man who had been forged by betrayal and hardship into someone worthy of carrying their name into the future. The Thornton legacy would continue, but it would continue with no illusions about love, loyalty, or forgiveness. It would continue with absolute clarity about what it took to survive in a world that showed no mercy to the weak. Derek looked down at his sleeping grandson and smiled. The boy would grow up knowing truths that most people never learned. That trust was earned through strength, that loyalty was maintained through fear, and that forgiveness was a luxury that could cost everything. In 18 years, when Derek Thornton III came of age, he would inherit an empire built on uncompromising principles and maintained through ruthless commitment to those principles. And if he ever chose betrayal over loyalty, he would discover that his father and grandfather had taught him everything he needed to know about the consequences of that choice. The cycle was complete. The prodigal son had returned as the avenging father, and the next generation was already being prepared for their role in the family business. Derek Thornton had won every war that mattered, and now his victory would echo through generations of men who understood that in the Thornton family, forgiveness was not an option. It was a weakness that could destroy everything they'd built. As Derek left Tyler's apartment that evening, his phone buzzed with a text from his son. "Dad, I found Brad's note." He claimed he had evidence that could expose the truth about what happened 8 years ago. "Should I be concerned?" Derek typed back. "The only truth that matters is that we survived and they didn't. Delete the note and forget Brad Sinclair ever existed." Tyler's response was immediate. "Already done. See you tomorrow for dinner." Derek smiled as he walked to his car. Tyler had truly learned everything Derek had tried to teach him. The Thornton legacy was secure for another generation. And somewhere in the city, anyone who had ever considered betraying the Thornton family could rest assured that the consequences would be swift, final, and absolutely unforgiving. Derek Thornton's war was over, but his victory would last forever. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Marvin Mead had always considered himself an average man living an extraordinary life. Not extraordinary in the way movies portrayed. No secret agent past or hidden millions. Extraordinary because at 42, he'd managed something rare, genuine contentment. His architecture firm in suburban Portland had just landed the Morrison Tower project. His marriage to Audrey remained solid after 17 years, and his son Casey, now 16, had somehow survived adolescence without becoming a complete stranger. That Tuesday morning, Marvin remembered pouring coffee while Casey inhaled pancakes at the kitchen counter, thumbs flying across his phone screen. "Dad, can I borrow the car Friday?" Casey asked between bites. "There's this photography exhibit downtown Jake wants to check out." "Photography?" Marvin raised an eyebrow. "Since when are you into that?" "Since I need an elective credit and Mrs. Fletcher's class looked easy." Casey grinned, that familiar smirk that reminded Marvin of his own younger brother Dale. The same cocky confidence that either charmed you or made you want to punch him. Marvin hadn't thought about Dale in months. They'd made an agreement 6 years ago. No contact unless absolutely necessary. Dale's business made that essential. Some brothers sold insurance. Dale Mead sold something far more permanent. "Ask your mother about the car," Marvin said, watching his son gather his backpack. "And Casey? Try actually learning something in that class. Might surprise you." Casey rolled his eyes but smiled as he headed out. "Love you too, old man." Those were the last words Marvin heard his son speak for 3 days. The first 24 hours of Casey's absence felt more like annoyance than alarm. Teenagers pushed boundaries. Audrey called his friends. Jake Blake hadn't seen him since school. The photography exhibit story checked out. Casey had mentioned it to multiple people, but his phone went straight to voicemail. His social media went dark. By day 2, Marvin's architect's mind, trained to see patterns and structural flaws, began assembling darker possibilities. Casey wasn't rebellious. He didn't do drugs, didn't run with rough crowds. He was a good kid who occasionally forgot to text back, not someone who vanished without a trace. Detective Terrence Davenport had the demeanor of a man counting days until retirement. He sat across from Marvin and Audrey in the police station, tapping a pen against a nearly empty notepad. "Mr. and Mrs. Mead, I understand you're worried, but statistically, most teenage disappearances resolve themselves within 72 hours. Kids need space. They make impulsive decisions." "Casey isn't impulsive," Audrey interrupted, her voice cracking. She'd barely slept. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Something happened to him. I know my son." Davenport's expression softened slightly. "Ma'am, we've checked hospitals, accident reports. His friends claim they don't know anything. No signs of foul play, no witnesses. Without evidence of a crime, this falls into runaway protocol. We've issued a bolo, checked his banking activity, Has there been any? Marvin leaned forward. No transactions since Monday evening. Gas station purchase, $8.47. Davenport consulted his notes, which actually supports the runaway theory. Kid takes cash, goes off-grid for a bit. He had $12 in his wallet, Marvin said quietly. I know because he hit me up for $20 Monday night. I gave him 15. He wouldn't get far on $27. Davenport shrugged. Maybe he's crashing with someone. First love, family drama we don't know about. These situations usually involve a catalyst. Marvin felt Audrey's hand grip his arm. He stood jaw tight. Thank you for your time, detective. Outside the station, Audrey finally broke. They're not doing anything. They think he just ran away from us. Like we're bad parents. Marvin pulled her close, his own fear masked by necessity. Someone had to stay functional. They're wrong. We find him ourselves if we have to. That evening, Marvin stood in Casey's bedroom, searching for clues Davenport had dismissed. Band posters on walls. Sketches scattered across a desk. Casey did have talent, despite his protests about the easy elective. A laptop password protected. Normal teenage chaos. Then Marvin noticed something. Casey's camera was gone. The decent DSLR they'd bought him last Christmas, rarely used despite the photography class excuse. Why would a runaway take a camera? Marvin checked the closet, the drawers. Casey's hiking backpack was missing too. Not the school bag found abandoned in his locked car at the school parking lot, but the larger pack he used for camping trips. It was planned, or someone wanted it to look planned. The envelope appeared the next morning, Wednesday, slipped under their front door while they slept. No postmark, no return address. Just their names handwritten in crude block letters. Audrey found it first. Her scream brought Marvin running downstairs. The note inside was printed, impersonal, terrifying. We have Casey. $2 million in unmarked bills. Instructions to follow. No police or he dies. You have 72 hours. Beneath the words was a photograph, time-stamped from yesterday. Casey, bound to a chair in what looked like a basement. His left eye was swollen, a cut above his eyebrow. But he was alive, staring at the camera with defiance rather than fear. Audrey collapsed into sobs. Marvin held the photo with steady hands despite the rage building in his chest. His architect's mind kicked in automatically, analyzing details. Concrete walls, exposed pipes overhead. Older building. The light source came from the left, a window maybe, but the angle suggested basement level. Casey's shirt was the same one for Monday. $2 million. Marvin's firm was successful, but not that successful. They had maybe $300,000 in savings and investments. The house had equity. Maybe he could scrape together $700,000 total if he liquidated everything immediately. We have to call Davenport back, Audrey said through tears. Show him this. They'll have to help now. They said no police. Marvin's voice was hollow. Marvin, we can't handle this alone. We don't have that kind of money. And even if we did, kidnappers don't just let people go. We need the FBI, professionals. We need Dale. The words hung in the air. Audrey's head snapped up. No, absolutely not. You promised. Our son is being tortured for money we don't have by people who will kill him regardless. Marvin met her eyes. Dale is a professional. A different kind, but he's family. He's the only one who can help. He's a contract killer, Marvin. A criminal. He's my brother. And he's exactly what Casey needs right now. The number Marvin dialed hadn't been used in 6 years. The agreement had been clear after Dale's last visit. The one where Dale had shown up drunk at 2 a.m., covered in someone else's blood, asking if he could crash for a week. Audrey had put her foot down. Dale's life and theirs couldn't intersect anymore. Too dangerous. Too wrong. But some promises shatter when your child's life hangs in the balance. The phone rang 3 times. Then a familiar voice, rougher than Marvin remembered. Took you long enough. Dale, I know. Your neighbor Stephen Blake called me yesterday when Casey didn't come home. Been tracking it since. Figured you'd cave eventually and dial. Marvin's breath caught. You knew. Little brother, I've had eyes on your family for years. You think I'd actually just disappear? Your blood. A pause. Casey's blood too. Tell me everything. Marvin explained about the ransom note, the photo, the police's indifference. With each detail, he felt something shift. Control sliding away from the terrified father to the desperate brother who'd just invited the devil back into his life. 2 million is specific, Dale mused. Not round, not random. Someone knows your financials. This isn't opportunistic. It's personal or professional. Who wants to hurt you? I'm an architect. I design buildings. I don't have enemies. Everyone has enemies. They just don't always know it. Dale's tone shifted, became businesslike. Listen carefully. Don't contact police again. Don't mention me to anyone. Act devastated but compliant. Wait for their next message. I'm already working the other end. What other end? Finding the people stupid enough to kidnap a Meade's kid. Give me 8 hours. The line went quiet for a moment. Marvin, Casey will be home before dinner tomorrow. And these people will never hurt anyone again. Dale don't. But his brother had already hung up. Marvin stood in his home office, staring at his phone, feeling like he'd just triggered something irreversible. In trying to save his son, he might have unleashed something worse than the kidnappers themselves. Audrey appeared in the doorway. What did he say? That Casey will be okay. And the people who took him? Marvin met her eyes. That they won't know what hit them. Dale Meade arrived at Marvin's house at midnight, driving a nondescript gray sedan that probably wasn't his. He looked different than 6 years ago. Leaner, harder, with scars Marvin didn't remember. His brother had always been the wild one, but now he carried himself with predatory stillness. They sat in Marvin's home office while Audrey reluctantly made coffee. She'd agreed to Dale's involvement out of desperation, not trust. Talk me through your life, Dale said, pulling out a tablet. Clients you pissed off. Business rivals. Anyone with a grudge. I told you, I'm an architect. And I'm a consultant. Dale's smile held no warmth. We both use euphemisms. But my job taught me everyone is dirt. Projects that went wrong? Deals that soured. Marvin thought hard. The Morrison Tower. It's a major contract, $50 million development. 3 firms bid. We won. The others didn't take it well. Names. Johnny Mahoney's firm was the favorite. He's been in Portland commercial architecture for 20 years. Has connections I don't. When we landed Morrison, he made some threats. Dale's eyes sharpened. What kind of threats? Nothing like this. Just said we'd regret undercutting him. Implied he'd badmouth us around town. Marvin shook his head. But kidnapping? Over a contract? That's insane. Insane pays well in my industry. Dale scrolled through his tablet. Johnny Mahoney, 56, twice divorced. Firm's been struggling since 2020. Morrison Tower would have saved him. He looked up. Desperate men do desperate things. Even if it's him, how do we find Casey? We don't have the ransom. You're still thinking like a civilian. Dale stood, pacing. They don't want the money. They want revenge. The ransom is just the framework, which means they'll kill Casey regardless of payment because he's seen their faces. The bluntness hit Marvin like a punch. Then what? So we don't play their game. We play mine. Dale pulled up a map on his tablet. I made some calls. 3 separate sources confirmed Mahoney's been asking around about mercenary work, the criminal kind. He's connected to an enforcer named Ricky Ray, lowlife who specializes in intimidation, kidnapping, off-book debt collection. How did you find this in 8 hours? Dale smiled grimly. I know people who owe me. Violently. Ricky Ray operates out of an old warehouse district near the docks. For locations he's used before. I've had eyes on them since yesterday. Marvin felt something cold settle in his stomach. You've been planning this since Stephen called you. I don't plan. I execute. Dale zoomed in on one warehouse. This one shows recent activity. Power usage spiked 3 days ago. Someone's running generators. That's where I'm hitting tonight. We're hitting tonight, Marvin corrected. Dale shook his head. You're a father, not an operator. You'll get Casey killed. He's my son. Marvin's voice was steel. I'm not sitting here drinking coffee while you storm a warehouse. If you're going, I'm going. The brothers stared at each other. Finally, Dale nodded. You follow my lead. You do exactly what I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood. Understood. Good. Dale checked his watch. Gear up. We move in 2 hours. The warehouse district was a graveyard of Portland's industrial past. Rusting structures loomed against the cloudy night sky. Chain-link fences half-collapsed around forgotten lots. Dale parked 3 blocks away, then equipped Marvin with a Kevlar vest and earpiece. "Your backup," Dale explained, loading weapons with practiced efficiency. "You stay at the entrance, eyes on exits. Someone runs, you report position. You don't engage. Clear. Clear. If shooting starts, hit the ground. I'll handle it." Dale met his eyes. "Your job is to bring Casey out when I give the signal. Nothing else matters. Not revenge, not justice. Just Casey." They approached on foot, using shadows and abandoned equipment for cover. Dale moved like smoke, and Marvin found himself mirroring his brother's movements, surprising himself with remembered skills from their childhood. The two of them sneaking out, stalking through woods, learning to be invisible. The warehouse matched the photograph's background. Concrete walls, aged structure, windows darkened. A single vehicle was parked outside, a van with primer splotch panels. Dale photographed the license plate, then signaled Marvin to position. "North entrance," Dale whispered through the earpiece. "Stay low, stay quiet. I'm going in the service door." Marvin watched his brother disappear around the corner. Minutes stretched. His heart hammered so hard he was sure it would give him away. Then he heard it, a muffled shout cut off. The sound of impact. Breaking glass. "Contact," Dale's voice crackled. 3 hostiles. 1 down, 2 engaged. "Casey's not here." Marvin's blood ran cold. "What? It's a trap, Marvin. Get out." The van's side door slid open. A figure emerged, pointing a gun directly at Marvin. "Don't move, or your brother dies too." Marvin froze. The gunman was young, maybe late 20s, with nervous eyes and shaking hands. Not a professional. That made him more dangerous. Inside, the gunman ordered. Slowly, as Marvin entered the warehouse, he saw Dale on his knees, gun to his head, held by a massive man with prison tattoos. Ricky Ray, presumably. A third man lay motionless near overturned crates, Dale's handiwork before the tables turned. And, standing behind them all, holding a phone like a trophy, was Johnny Mahoney. The architect looked different than his professional headshots. Unshaven, eyes wild with desperation and triumph. The famous Meade brothers, Mahoney sneered. The builder and the killer. Touching family reunion. "Where's my son?" Marvin's voice was steady despite the gun trained on him. "Safe. For now." Mahoney pocketed his phone. "Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate your pet psychopath getting involved?" Stephen Blake's been very chatty with his new drinking buddy at Murphy's bar. Turns out that buddy works for me. The moment he called Dale, I knew you'd come. Dale spoke through gritted teeth. "You're dead, Mahoney. You just don't know it yet." Big words for a man about to be buried in the Columbia River. Mahoney turned to Marvin. "Here's what happens next. You wire $1 million, half the ransom, to an account I'll provide. Then you sign over the Morrison Tower contract. You'll claim health reasons, recommend my firm. And maybe, just maybe, you see Casey again." "You're insane," Marvin said. "Even if I do all that, you'll kill us anyway." "Probably." Mahoney shrugged. "But you'll definitely die if you refuse. At least this way you have hope." That's when Marvin noticed something. Dale's eyes weren't on Mahoney or the guns. They were fixed on a point above and behind Ricky Ray. Following his gaze, Marvin saw pipes running along the ceiling. Old steam pipes, probably corroded, definitely unstable if impacted. Dale caught Marvin's understanding. The smallest nod. "You're right," Marvin said loudly, drawing Mahoney's attention. "I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt my son." As Mahoney smiled, savoring victory, Dale moved. His hand shot out, grabbed Ricky Ray's gun arm, twisted. The gun discharged, deafening in the enclosed space, but the bullet went high, exactly where Dale intended. It struck the steam pipe dead center. The pipe exploded with decades of built-up pressure. Superheated steam erupted, filling the space with scalding fog. Ricky Ray screamed as it hit him directly. The nervous gunman panicked, firing blindly. Dale was already moving, using the chaos like a weapon. "Run!" Dale's shout cut through the confusion. Marvin ran, but not toward the exit. He tackled the nervous gunman as another shot went wild, wrestling the weapon away. Training he didn't know he had kicked in, or maybe it was just desperation and adrenaline. The gun clattered away. Marvin's fist connected with the man's jaw, once, twice, until he went limp. Through the thinning steam, Marvin saw Dale finishing Ricky Ray with brutal efficiency. Mahoney was running for the exit, phone in hand. "He's getting away," Marvin shouted. "Let him," Dale replied calmly, checking the unconscious men for weapons. "He's not going far." Back at Marvin's house, Audrey nearly collapsed seeing them return bloody but alive. Dale cleaned up in the guest bathroom while Marvin explained what happened, leaving out the most violent details. "Casey wasn't there," Audrey repeated, voice hollow. "Then where is he?" Dale emerged, looking almost respectable in borrowed clothes. "With someone else. Mahoney's not running this operation. He's middle management. The kidnapping came first. Then someone saw an opportunity to use Mahoney's grudge as cover." "Who?" Marvin demanded. "That's what Mahoney's going to tell us." Dale held up a phone, Mahoney's phone, lifted during the steam chaos confusion. "Man's got messages here from someone called K. Schaefer. Very interested in Casey's whereabouts. The ransom timeline, whether you'd involve authorities." Marvin's blood ran cold. "Karen Schaefer. She's a project manager at Morrison Development. I've worked with her directly on the tower plans." "Tell me about her." "Mid-30s, ambitious, been with Morrison for 5 years. She's professional. Cold, but competent." Marvin tried to connect the dots. "Why would she be involved?" Dale scrolled through messages. "Because your contract negotiations included a clause about design rights and profit sharing on future developments. You'd make millions beyond the initial fee if Morrison expands the tower concept to other cities. But here's the thing," he showed Marvin a text. "Schaefer had a separate deal with Mahoney. If his firm got the contract, she'd get a kickback and promotion. Your win destroyed both their plans. So this whole thing, the kidnapping, the ransom, it's about a building contract?" Audrey's voice shook with fury. "It's about money and revenge. Classic motivations." Dale kept scrolling. "But Schaefer's smart. She's using Mahoney as the fall guy. He thinks they're partners. She's actually setting him up to take the entire blame while she disappears with the ransom, if you'd paid it." "Where's Casey?" Marvin asked again. Dale found what he was looking for. "Address here. A property Schaefer inherited from her father. Cabin in the mountains, off-grid, no neighbors for miles. That's where she's holding him. Probably figure Mahoney would botch the warehouse play, get arrested or killed, and she'd still have leverage with Casey hidden away." "Then let's go." Marvin grabbed his jacket. "Not yet." Dale held up a hand. "She doesn't know we have Mahoney's phone. She doesn't know her plan failed. So we use that." "Use it how?" Dale's smile was predatory. "We make her come to us." Dale's plan was elegantly vicious. Using Mahoney's phone, he sent messages to Karen Schaefer confirming the warehouse went smoothly. The Meade brothers were handled, and arrangements were being made to dispose of evidence. He requested an in-person meeting to split the proceeds and release the kid. Schaefer's response was cautious but greedy. She suggested a public location, a parking garage downtown, mid-level, enough witnesses for safety, but enough shadows for discretion. "She's scared," Dale analyzed. "Scared means sloppy. We can work with that." They brought in Stephen Blake, the neighbor who'd inadvertently been Mahoney's information source. Stephen was horrified learning his casual mentions of Casey's disappearance had been weaponized and volunteered to help however he could. "You're about my build," Dale told Stephen. "You'll wear Mahoney's jacket, meet Schaefer, keep her talking. We'll have audio. The moment she confirms Casey's location, confirms her involvement, we move." "This is insane," Audrey protested. "What if she brings backup? What if she shoots him?" "Then I shoot back," Dale said simply. "This ends tonight, Audrey. One way or another." Stephen wore a wire and Mahoney's distinctive leather jacket. Marvin and Dale positioned themselves at different points in the parking garage, invisible among the cars. Dale carried enough weaponry to start a small war. Marvin held a gun Dale had given him with a 10-minute crash course, hoping he wouldn't need to use it. At 11 p.m., Karen Schaefer arrived in a luxury sedan that screamed embezzlement. She was exactly as Marvin remembered. Striking features, designer clothes, an aura of controlled ambition. But tonight, her eyes held something else. Desperation masked as confidence. Stephen approached as coached, keeping his face partially hidden. "Took you long enough," he said, mimicking Mahoney's gravelly voice. "Where are the bodies?" Schaefer asked immediately, no pleasantries. "In the river. Like we discussed. Now where's my cut?" Schaefer pulled out an envelope. "Half now. Half when the kids confirm dead and Morrison signs with your firm." Through the earpiece, Marvin heard Dale's sharp intake of breath. Confirmed dead. Casey was alive, but wouldn't stay that way under Schaefer's plan. "About the kid," Stephen ventured. "Maybe we don't need to. He's seen too much." "I explained this, Johnny." Schaefer's voice hardened. "Your sentimentality is what got you divorced twice. The cabin's isolated. It'll look like a tragic accident. Runaway teen gets lost in the woods, exposure, animals. Very sad." "You cold bitch," Stephen said, breaking character. Schaefer's eyes narrowed, then widened in recognition. "You're not." Dale appeared from behind a concrete pillar, gun trained on her. "Move and you die." Schaefer froze, calculating. Her hand drifted toward her purse. "I'm unarmed." "You're a liar." Dale closed the distance, kicked the purse away. A small pistol skittered across concrete. "Casey's location. Now, I want immunity. I'll testify against Mahoney." Marvin stepped into view. "You kidnapped my son, held him for 3 days, planned to murder him. You think there's any deal that saves you?" Recognition flashed across Schaefer's face. "Marvin?" "But they said," she glanced at Stephen, realization dawning. "The warehouse was a trap." "My trap," Dale corrected. "Mahoney's singing to the FBI right now. Ricky Ray's in intensive care. You're done, Miss Schaefer. Question is whether you die here or in prison. I prefer here, quicker, cleaner. My brother, though, he's got this annoying conscience about killing women in parking garages." "I have money," Schaefer said quickly. "Offshore accounts. 3 million. You can have it all. I want my son." Marvin's voice could cut steel. "Tell me where he is, and you live to see a courtroom. Stay silent, and my brother doesn't miss." Schaefer looked between them, doing the math. She was trapped, and she knew it. Finally, she gave the address, the same one Dale had found on Mahoney's phone, confirmation they needed. "He's locked in the basement, chained but alive. Food and water for 5 days." She met Marvin's eyes. "I wasn't going to kill him until after you paid. I'm not a monster." "Yeah," Dale said. "You are." He zip-tied her hands as Marvin called Detective Davenport, explaining just enough to get the detective's attention and the FBI involved. By the time police arrived, Schaefer was secured, and the Meade brothers were gone, racing toward the mountains to bring Casey home. The cabin was a dilapidated structure clinging to a mountainside, accessible only by a winding dirt road Dale's sedan barely navigated. Dawn was breaking as they arrived, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like the final level of a nightmare. Dale went in first, systematically clearing rooms. Marvin followed, heart in his throat, terrified of what they'd find. The basement door was padlocked from the outside, a detail that made Marvin's blood boil. "Casey," he shouted, pounding on the door. "Casey, it's Dad." A muffled response from below. "Alive." He was alive. Dale shot the padlock off. They descended into musty darkness, Marvin's flashlight beam cutting through shadows until it found him. Casey, chained to a support beam, face bruised but eyes bright with recognition and relief. "Dad!" Casey's voice cracked. "You actually found me?" Marvin crossed the distance in 3 strides, pulling his son into an embrace that probably hurt Casey's ribs, but he didn't care. "I've got you. You're safe. You're safe." Dale made quick work of the chains with bolt cutters from his kit. Casey staggered, standing up, 3 days of limited movement taking their toll. He looked at Dale, recognition dawning. "Uncle Dale, you're here. Wouldn't be anywhere else, kid." Dale's tough facade cracked slightly. "You okay? Need a doctor?" "I'm okay. Bruised, scared out of my mind, but okay." Casey looked between them. How did you? Long story, Marvin said. Involving your uncle's very specific skill set and your father's apparently hidden talent for warehouse brawling. We'll debrief later. Right now, let's get you home to your mother. As they helped Casey up the stairs, the teenager suddenly stopped. Dad, the people who took me, are they? Marvin understood the unspoken question. In custody, going to prison for a very long time. They can't hurt you or anyone else again. And Uncle Dale? Is he in trouble? Dale snorted. Kid, I'm always in trouble. But not today. Today I'm the hero uncle who saved the day. I'm milking that for at least a year of Thanksgiving invites. Despite everything, Casey laughed. Then he hugged Dale, surprising everyone. Thank you. Seriously. I heard them talking. They were going to kill me. You saved my life. Dale looked uncomfortable with the gratitude, but returned the hug. That's what family does. The drive back was quiet, Casey dozing the back seat, Marvin processing everything. As they reached city limits, Dale broke the silence. You did go back there, at the warehouse in the garage. You didn't fold. I had a good teacher, Marvin replied. Remember those summers at Grandpa's cabin? You teaching me to track deer, move quietly, fight dirty. You remember that? I remembered when it counted. Marvin glanced at his brother. You're staying for a while, right? At least until Casey's recovered. Dale was quiet. My life, it's complicated. Dangerous. Being around you puts you at risk. Being away from you almost got Casey killed. Our risk calculation clearly needs adjustment. Marvin's tone brooked no argument. Your family, Dale. Maybe it's time we stop pretending that can be turned off. They pulled into the driveway as Audrey burst from the house. Her cry of joy seeing Casey alive was something Marvin would remember forever. She held their son like she'd never let go, tears streaming, checking him for injuries while apologizing for crying. Casey, battered and exhausted, smiled through his own tears. Mom, I'm okay. Dad and Uncle Dale, they're like an action movie team. It was incredible and terrifying, but mostly incredible. Don't encourage them, Audrey said, but she was smiling through tears, looking at Dale with something approaching gratitude. 3 weeks later, life had achieved a strange new equilibrium. Casey was back in school, attending therapy for the trauma, but remarkably resilient. The photography class turned into actual interest. He'd spent his captivity observing light patterns in the basement, mentally composing shots as a coping mechanism. Turned out fear could be channeled into art. The legal aftermath was satisfying in its thoroughness. Karen Schaefer faced federal kidnapping charges, attempted murder, and conspiracy. Her offshore accounts were frozen, her professional reputation destroyed. Johnny Mahoney turned state's evidence, receiving a lighter but still significant sentence. Ricky Ray recovered from his burns only to face decades behind bars. Detective Davenport, embarrassed by his initial dismissiveness, quietly ensured the investigation credited anonymous tips rather than questioning how the Meade brothers had accomplished what the police hadn't. Some victories were better left unexamined. The Morrison Tower contract proceeded with new security measures and background checks. Marvin's firm's reputation actually improved. The architect who fought to save his son became a local news story, painting him as a dedicated father rather than focusing on the criminal implications of Dale's involvement. Dale stayed. Not officially, not permanently, but he rented an apartment in Portland. Taking a sabbatical, he claimed, though from what job exactly remained unspoken. He showed up for dinners, taught Casey actual photography skills, and demonstrated a gentleness with family that contradicted everything about his professional life. One evening, Marvin found Casey and Dale on the back porch, discussing composition and shadow play. Casey was animatedly explaining his vision for a photo series about isolation and connection, using his basement captivity as thematic foundation, turning trauma into art. Your kid's got talent, Dale said when Casey went inside for more coffee. Real talent. Not just technical skill, vision. He sees things differently now. Trauma does that, Marvin said quietly. Changes how you see the world. Makes you stronger if you survive it. Dale watched the sunset. You surprised me, Marvin. At the warehouse, the garage, you didn't hesitate. You went to places most civilians never access. You mean I learned I'm capable of violence when my family's threatened? I mean you learned you're capable, period. That's not a bad thing to know about yourself. Dale turned to him. I'm sorry I stayed away so long. The agreement we made, it seemed right at the time. Keep my darkness away from your light. But maybe darkness has its uses. Maybe family is about showing up when things get dark, not just when they're bright. Marvin nodded. You saved Casey. More than that. You taught me I could save him too. That I didn't have to be helpless. He paused. But Dale, next time someone threatens my family, I'm hoping your consultation services are available immediately rather than after 3 days of terror. Dale laughed, the sound genuine and warm. Brother, I've had surveillance on your house since I left 6 years ago. Rotating teams, discreet. You think I actually trusted that you'd be safe without me? I just couldn't be here in person. But I was always watching. You've been watching us? Protecting you. There's a difference. Dale pulled out his phone, showed Marvin a photo, Casey at school, dated from last year. Another of Audrey at the grocery store. Marvin himself at a client meeting. I know it's creepy, but it's what I am. A protector. A killer when necessary. Your brother always. Marvin should have been disturbed. Instead, he felt oddly comforted. Thank you. For everything. Thank me by letting me be part of this family properly. No more disappearing. No more agreements to stay away. I'm done hiding who I am. Dale met his eyes. I do bad things to bad people. That's my job. But this, you Audrey Casey, this is my purpose. I need you to understand the difference. I understand. Marvin clasped his brother's shoulder. You're welcome here. Always. Whatever you do out there, and here you're just Dale. The annoying little brother who can disarm a kidnapper and take a mean photograph, apparently. Casey returned with coffees, handing them out. What are we talking about? Family, Marvin said simply. And new beginnings. Casey sat between them, relaxed and safe. I've been thinking about my college essay. The prompt about overcoming challenges. Most kids write about sports injuries or bad grades. I'm thinking I might have a more interesting story. Casey, Audrey's voice came from the doorway, concern evident. I'm not going to write about the kidnapping specifically, Casey assured her, joining them on the porch. More about how crisis reveals character. How family shows up. How sometimes safety isn't about avoiding danger, but about having people who will walk through fire to bring you home. He looked at Marvin and Dale. I was terrified in that basement, but I also knew you'd come. Both of you. I didn't know how, but I knew. That's what got me through. Trust in you. Marvin felt his throat tighten. We'll always come for you. Whatever it takes. I know. Casey smiled. That's the point of the essay. About knowing you're not alone, even in the dark. About family being your foundation when everything else crumbles. As the sun set over Portland, the Meade family sat together. Imperfect, complicated, marked by violence and trauma, but also by love and unbreakable bonds. Somewhere in the city, Karen Schaefer sat in a cell. Johnny Mahoney contemplated his failures, and other threats remained unknown and unformed. But here, in this moment, Casey was safe. Dale was home, and Marvin understood something fundamental. Some architecture was built with steel and concrete, but the strongest foundations were built with trust, sacrifice, and a willingness to fight for those you loved. The Morrison Tower would rise downtown, a testament to Marvin's professional skill. But his real masterpiece was right here, a family that had been tested in fire and emerged stronger, tougher, and united in ways that couldn't be broken. Casey's camera clicked, capturing the moment. 3 generations of Meade strength, silhouetted against